This podcast is sponsored by the Tree of Life Memorials and Digital in Stone. This is a new platform to create digital memorials, environmental legacies, and fine art monuments. This way we could share the stories, preserve the memories, conserve the land, and connect the souls, because love never dies.
This podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 45 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions when there's a crisis.
So welcome to this week's show. Please relax, get yourself something comforting to drink, maybe some hot cocoa and some pie. And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me for our discussion about family. Like the BBC, we see our shows offering entertainment, enlightenment, and education, and divided into three halves to address each of these goals. Our main topic is in the second half, so feel free to fast forward to that no chit-chat section if you need to. Our topic this week is the view of family in Indigenous populations, which is part of our ongoing series about health disparities. In the first half, Charlie talks about the history of fry bread, and we have the recipe of the week. In the second half, we welcome back Dr. Jeanna Ford, a clinical nurse specialist from the Department of Internal Medicine at the University of New Mexico Health System in Albuquerque, and we'll be talking about the role of family in Indigenous American lives. And in the third half, Charlie has an essay from Joy Harjo, poet laureate and native of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. So, Charlie, when I first moved here to Oklahoma, they would have these fundraisers and they would serve Indian tacos. And I would say, first off, what's an Indian taco?
That's my question right there. Okay, yes.
Yeah, what's an Indian taco? And why do they call it Indian tacos? And, you know, sort of what was the origin of them? And I understand that you're kind of going to explain that to me.
Yes, absolutely. Today, I'm going to talk about the most controversial Indigenous American food, fry bread. Fry bread contains only 4 ingredients: flour, baking powder, salt, and water, flattened and fried over an open fire until bubbly and crisp. Sounds like pizza. But behind this simple recipe is a complex and a bit tragic history. Well, not a bit tragic. Now considered a pan-Indian food that's nearly universal across the 574 federally recognized tribes, fry bread is not indigenous to Native American cuisine. Instead, most trace its origin to the internment camps that arose from the forced displacement of tribes by the American government in the mid-1800s. One such camp emerged from what would become known as the Long Walk. In 1864, the federal government of the United States rounded up Navajo people and forced them to march 300 miles south from their northern Arizona and Four Corners area homelands to eastern New Mexico at Bosque Redondo. Hundreds of people died each day, and even more died during their encampment. Hundreds of miles away from familiar lands where they could hunt and grow familiar crops, the Navajo starved. The federal government issued them rations of flour, salt, and lard, and they created the recipe for fry bread, which helped them survive internment until an 1868 treaty allowed them to return home. This story was repeated among Native American communities who experienced similar relocations and internments across the United States. Today, fry bread is commonly eaten at ceremonial events, feast days, and powwows, intertribal fairs that include traditional dances and vendor markets. Since the federal government prohibited gatherings and expressions of indigenous identity for much of the 19th, and 20th centuries, powwows are often celebrated as a space to carry on heritage and express cultural pride, and it's at those fairs where many non-Native Americans are likely to encounter the dish. Many fairs have fry bread stands, where the bread may be topped with honey or powdered sugar, along with competitions for the best version of the dish. Pawhuska, Oklahoma, has long hosted the National Indian Taco Championship, which pits competitors against each other to make the best version of fry bread topped with topical taco toppings, also known as the three T's, such as meat.
With topical taco toppings.
Yes.
Typical.
Yes. It's huge controversy. That's why it's topical. But you know what? In the interest of the three T's, let's say topped with typical taco toppings, also known as the three T's, such as meat, beans, lettuce, tomato, and cheese.
So you've never had? Have you never had a Indian taco?
I have not, though I have had, which in my Mexican family is known as tacos, with meat, beans, lettuce, tomato, and cheese.
But not on the fry bread. That's what makes it the Indian taco.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, my mother, when we were, and eventually was like, no, go to the store and buy the damn tacos yourselves. But my mom would make the taco shells at home.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes. And then she discovered supermarkets. According to Lois Ellen Frank, a Native American chef at the helm of Red Mesa Cuisine, who holds a doctorate in culinary anthropology, fried bread's history is a medley. It's a food that kept ancestors alive, she says. It's a survival food, but it's also one of colonization and subjugation. Health and wellness are a concern among this population that is plagued by obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure. A large slice of fry bread can contain 700 calories and 25 grams of fat. But after more than 150 years, it can be difficult to unravel the dish's complicated history from cultural experience. Fry bread has risen to the level of soul food, a dish they grew up eating with friends and family that has as much nostalgia as any other of Grandma's recipes.
Have you ever been to a powwow?
Does watching episodes of Bonanza count?
No.
Okay, in that case, no. Have you?
So in Oklahoma, on our federally recognized tribes, in Oklahoma, the tribes don't live on reservations. They have their own land that's not considered a reservation, and so there are powwows, celebrations for different reasons. And I did some research with the Comanches here in Oklahoma. And so I would go to the powwows and actually would take the girls with me. And I have a ceremonial shawl that was gifted to me.
Okay.
And at the powwows, the men would, play the drum. Right. And women are not allowed to do the drum, and the women and the men. But I'm trying to think. It's mostly the women are the ones who dance, and it's like exactly my speed of dancing because it's just sort of a bounce from one foot to the other. Right. People stand in a circle, and it's with your shawl and just sort of beat with the music, and then they have native dancers who are in what's called the regalia. They're feathers and beads and leather, and they're indigenous clothing, and those are phenomenal to see. People make their own, or they have people in their families that will make them for them, and they are just gorgeous. And so it's just like a great cultural experience. And if I've been told that if they feel like, like you're being a tourist and you're just there to watch and you don't talk to people or dance, then it's not polite and it's not appreciated.
It's not kosher.
But, but you know me, I talk to everybody.
Yeah, there we are. Yeah.
Eat all the food and danced. So, I was told I wasn't considered a tourist. So that was nice and complimentary.
Oh, that was nice. But, you're not considered a tourist. Yeah. That is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you ever get the opportunity at a festival or any kind of thing that is, all these are open to the public. And, and one of my favorite things is there's a guy with a copper flat bottom kind of kettle.
Right. Making
kettle corn. Have you ever had kettle popcorn?
I've had kettle corn. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like hot out of the kettle.
Yeah. It's
like, just give me a bag of that and I'm going to go sit over here and eat the whole thing.
Yep. I got that.
And I'm not joking. It's so good. That's like one of my favorite parts. But, and they always serve the Indian tacos. And most of the people, because of financial reasons, I think, bring their own food,
Oh, okay.
But there's always food to purchase as, part of their fundraisers. So, but if you get that opportunity, go, because it's really, really fascinating. And dance and talk to people. Don't be a tourist.
Have you and David seen Killers of the Flower Moon?
I haven't seen that yet. I read the book, and I'd heard really good reviews about the book, and I don't know. It was one of those stories that you ever read a book that you say, well, they could have done that in like 4 chapters. And maybe that's
many people feel the same about the running time of the movie. So yeah, we could have done that, like 20 minutes less. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a fascinating story.
Oh, really? It's just
I really didn't know about how much money was up there in the northern part of Oklahoma. But what's very typical here in Oklahoma, especially during the Depression, is that the men who made a lot of money here, whose names you see on buildings and who I won't say their names, but what they did is for people who were losing their farms, is they would go to these people and they would say, and white and natives, it didn't matter who they were screwing over.
Okay.
They would go to people who were losing their farms and say, I'll buy your farm, I'll lease it back to you. You can grow what you want on it, but I keep the mineral rights. And that was, before there was a lot of drilling. So then what would happen is that people would be working their farm that they'd had in their family from whenever they stole it during the land run, which is a whole other story. And they, then when oil was struck, these men who had come in became phenomenally rich, and the people who lived on the land and worked the land continued to be poor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Where the story that you're referring to, first, it's sort of like a phenomenal story because they let the Native Americans keep their oil rights. And so when they hit oil, they were like, oh my God. And now, these people are going to be filthy rich. And we're talking like filthy rich.
Oh, yeah.
And they were Native Americans. And so people were like, sort of like you hear now, this is our country and this is our land. You can't have that.
Yep.
So that's like a one-off story. That's not a story that you hear throughout Oklahoma or throughout, Arizona where there are native lands, is that most people, even whites, did not, when they fell into hardship, they did not get to keep their mineral rights.
Well, welcome to America.
Yeah. Well, we are talking about, health disparities. And that's sort of the origin of them, because if you don't have money, then you can't eat well.
Yes.
And you can't get the health care that you need, and you have a higher rate of death than, other groups. Like in the Native American population, you mentioned, diabetes. Women in indigenous populations are the number one group for diabetes in the country.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of illness within the indigenous population we'll talk about at other podcasts, but that are results of, nutrition and economics.
Boy, that's crazy, because here, of course, everything is very urban. In the poorer neighborhoods, Cheetos are a substitute for vegetables. The vegetables in, poorer sections where, mostly minorities live, is, fresh vegetables are not common. And, bag of Cheetos is more filling and less expensive. So it's the same thing. I mean, diabetes runs rampant, and just...
and obesity and everything, heart disease, everything that goes with it. Yep. And, and we pay for food stamps, as part of our, our taxes. And I've always, I came up with a different system in my head. Of course, I don't, it's never told, anybody in the government about it. But, my thought is that instead of saying, okay, Charlie, here's $5 in food stamps, you go get what you want with that. Instead say, here's 500 points in food stamps. And fruit and vegetables and healthy foods cost, quote unquote, fewer points than Cheetos. Oh. So you can have Cheetos, but it's going to cost you more points than if you buy healthier food for your kids. Don't you think that's a really good idea?
Yes, it is, actually.
Yeah. I've long thought that because, that's essentially what they did with cigarettes, is they made them phenomenally expensive that at some point people say, I'm not spending, $6 on a pack of cigarettes or whatever.
I'm laughing.
But how much is it now?
How
much is it now?
Oh, poo. Like $13, $14 a pack.
No.
Oh, yes.
No.
Oh, yes,
my
yes,
God.
yes. Yeah. Oh, it's high. Yeah, and
And then I see.
Depending on the certain, anywhere from $12 to $14 a pack. Yeah, it's really.
And then I'll see in healthcare where I've seen interns and residents say, well, they could go get their medicine if they weren't smoking. Like, wow.
What?
Yeah, it's like that's not for us to make a determination about.
Oh, these crazy kids. Yeah.
We manage their health care and we say, here's what you can do. But ultimately, we all have free choice.
Right. Yeah.
So
there
you have it. All the world's problems right here.
On E1D, everyonedies.org. So please go to our webpage at everyonedies.org for this week's recipe for fry bread and additional resources for this program. Your tax-deductible donations are always welcome so that we can continue to offer you quality programming. Thank you in advance for making your donation at www.everyonedies.org. That's dies.org. Marianne?
Thanks, Charlie. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jeanna Ford, a clinical nurse specialist from the Department of Internal Medicine at the University of New Mexico Health System in Albuquerque. Dr. Ford is Indigenous herself, coming from the Southern Cheyenne and Citizen Potawatomi nations, and practices palliative care in New Mexico, caring for many tribal patients from various reservations and pueblos. Our topic today is about Indigenous Indian families, which includes a wide circle of relatives who share resources and responsibilities. Family includes more than parents and children. Families include grandparents, uncles and aunts, cousins, and many others. The circle of relatives who live together or in proximity are linked in mutual interdependence. Grandparents and other community elders have always played a major role in rearing and educating the young. It's customary in many tribes for the grandparents to raise one or more of their grandchildren. This type of shared responsibility for parenting is a family and community strength. The grandchild is often seen as an extension of the grandmother and grandfather. So let's have a listen to my chat with Jeanna. So when you're talking about Indigenous Americans and the traditions, I know in my experience that the concept of family is very important. If you're speaking in generalizations, but the concept of family is very important. Generally, what I see is that it's a matriarchal kind of structure in terms of the women kind of are the decision makers, and that when people are sick, they're not looking for just Western medicine, that there's going to be sort of a use of Western medicine, but also lots of other things from nature and song and the presence of family. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about what we could expect to see or what people would want, or how we as friends of Indigenous Americans can be supportive and kind of do the things that people would find supportive when people are dying.
I think you're absolutely right. And again, it can vary from tribe to tribe, but for, at least my tribe, is a matriarchal, society, and it is a family event. And, when people are sick, it is, we are all there. We rally around them. We care for them. We're there together. And then even after they're gone, we have a wake. Often that's done in somebody's home. It can be done in a church, but we stay up with them all night telling stories. Even the little ones can tell stories. Nice memories of what happened. It's very much it's family. And so I think that, and again, to go back even further, what you said, yes, Western medicine is often used, but whether or not they will, and this is what I do in my practice, is I ask them, are you seeing, anybody else, a traditional healer? Is there anybody, and just say, it's okay. It's just, for instance, if they have cancer, just go ahead and let your oncologist know, because, a lot of times the dietitians, nutritionists, whatever, have like their own thing that they'll run it through just to make sure. So nobody's going to tell you can't do that. It's just important to let us know what you're taking. But there is a mixture, a blend of that, because there's very much a belief system. And it's like I mentioned earlier that, when we get sick or, in times of stress or pressure, often we revert back to, our culture, what we know. And so there very much is that belief. There's a duality there. And I think that, often it's, you can just ask them, I want to be here for you. I'm here. You can let them know, I'm here if you need me. Food is a really, really, a big way to let people know that you love them. Bring somebody food. I don't think you can ever go wrong with that. And so there are different things like that. I think that's really important, and to share with your loved ones, with your friends, with your family, and just letting them know I'm here. And I think each tribe is different, each family is different, each person is different. But I think no matter what, everybody wants to feel the love and the support. And grief is not something you should carry alone. Being sick isn't something you should feel alone. And so just knowing there was times I really kind of withdrew after my mom died, but I still have all the messages that people sent, even if I didn't respond right away, and it gave me comfort knowing that people were there. There was times I didn't want to see anybody, and then there was other times I wanted somebody just to sit next to me and, quietly be there with me. And so I think just being there sometimes, as we have in palliative, that compassionate presence, that we all learn palliative 101, I think is what we can do for other people. And that means you don't always have to be doing a task, but just being there for people, I think is really important. But I remember when I was, I think I was 15, maybe younger, 14. I was probably younger. I was, in that ridiculous age when I felt like I knew everything, and I got myself in a motorcycle wreck, and I had no business being on a motorcycle or driving it, and, ended up in the hospital for a week, and, was, getting all of the medical interventions. But I also had my uncle come in there, who was praying over me and, doing his traditional healing as well. And so it is a mixture, I think that that's very important to recognize. And that was just as important to me and to my family as it was, me being in the hospital. And so, I think that is something that, there is usually a duality, and it's not something everybody has to understand. It's just, it is what it is, if that makes sense.
Right. And also the concept of family, I found in my work with the Comanches, is much broader than, oh, this is my sister and this is my uncle, because people would say, oh, this is my mother and this is my mother and this is my mother, and I'd say, wait a minute, how many are there? And they'd say, oh, well, it's different, and I started in that work. I call both of my sisters have died. My blood sisters have died, but I'll call people who I'm close to my sister, yeah, sister, I use that term because in the Comanche population, your family extends beyond blood. Is that something you found yourself?
It is. And yeah. And, what I always tell people is family is who the patient says it is. And it's just, that's the long and the short of it. And it's interesting because, when you grow up a certain way, it's kind of, you can be ethnocentric. Like you think this is the way it is across the board. And that's how I was. And so it wasn't until, I was married, my husband, who is white, and he's from Arkansas, and he started talking about, first cousin once removed, and I was like, what in the world? He's telling me all of that, and I was like, that makes no sense to me. And then, I kind of jokingly, I'm like, you have to do that because you're from Arkansas and the inbreeding, and so it's a little joke, but I'm like, no, and so I tell him, no, that's my cousin, no, that's my aunt. He's like, so is this the first, second, or third? I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so it is, we have a kind of a different genealogy, and it's so, and so I've learned how to kind of interpret it. So like, I have my mother had one sister and, 3 or 4 brothers, but I have many aunts and uncles. And so all of her cousins are my aunts and uncles. And so I've had to kind of explain this to my husband. And then so all of their children are my cousins, but my children call them my cousins aunt, auntie, uncle, whatever. And so it can be quite confusing, and then if, you go into the hospital and, they try to make it really simple, it's not that way. And so a good rule of thumb is family is whoever they say it is. And, so for grandparents, it's the same way, but it is. And, I always say, well, I like my way better. I think it makes more sense.
Thanks, Marianne. In our third half, here's an essay by Poet Laureate Joy Harjo titled A Sacred Connection to the Sun. I believe in the sun, in the tangle of human failures, of fear, greed, and forgetfulness, the sun gives me clarity. When explorers first encountered my people, they called us heathens, sun worshippers. They didn't understand that the sun is a relative and illuminates our path on this earth. Many of us continue ceremonies that ensure a connection with the sun. After dancing all night in a circle, we realize that we are part of a larger set of stars and planets dancing with us overhead. When the sun rises at the apex of the ceremony, we are renewed. There is no mistaking this connection, though Walmart might be just down the road. Humans are vulnerable and rely on the kindness of the earth and the sun. We exist together in a sacred field of meaning. A few weeks ago, I visited some friends at a pueblo for a feast day celebration. The runners were up at dawn and completed a ceremonial race that ensures that the sun will continue to return. It is a humble and necessary act of respect. And because the celebration continues, the sun, the earth, and these humans are still together in a harmonious relationship. Our earth is shifting. We can all see it. I hear from my Inuit and Yupik relatives up north that everything has changed. It's so hot. There's not enough winter. Animals are confused. Ice is melting. The quantum physicists have it right. They are beginning to think like Indians. Everything is connected dynamically at an intimate level. When you remember this, then the current wobble of the earth makes sense. How much more oil can be drained without replacement, without reciprocity? One day, recently, I walked out of a hotel room just off Times Square at dawn to find the sun. It was the fourth morning since the birth of my fourth granddaughter. This was the morning I was to present her to the sun, as a relative, as one of us. It was still dark, overcast as I walked through Times Square. I stood beneath a 21st century totem pole of symbols and multinational corporations made of flash and neon. The sun rose up over the city, but I couldn't see it amidst the rain. Though I was not at home, bundling up the baby to carry her outside, I carried this newborn girl within the cradleboard of my heart. I held her up and presented her to the sun, so she would be recognized as a relative, so that she won't forget this connection, this promise, so that we all remember the sacredness of life. That's great.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening, folks. Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies. This is Charlie Navarrete. And from Queen Gertrude, Hamlet's mom. Thou knowest 'tis common, all that lives must die.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.